The British government wants to change the right of assembly with a reform. It's just one of several measures that critics condemn as an attack on democracy and the separation of powers. Authoritarian, reactionary, repressive. The criticism in the House of Lords of possible restrictions on the freedom to demonstrate through the planned British police law could hardly have been more scathing. Members of the House of Lords inflicted one vote defeat after the other on Prime Minister Boris Johnson's government on Tuesday night. By a large majority, the Lords rejected several paragraphs in the draft of the proposed new Police Act. For example, it provided for significant restrictions on protests if the police considered them to be a noise nuisance or block traffic routes. Well, we would have much less than in that case. With the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill, the Johnson government wants to put climate and anti-racism protests in their place, which have made headlines in recent years. The bill went through the last stage in the upper house on Tuesday night and should then return to the lower house. The government is expected to largely reverse the Lords' changes to the Commons or in the Commons. Usually, the House of Lords gives way in this case. Critics fear that the vague regulations and powers for the police could lead to the dissolution of any demo as illegal. If one can no longer express one's disapproval of the government's action with noise on the street, human rights are seriously called into question, said Conservative Upper House member John Gummer during the debate on Monday evening. The Bishop of Leeds, Nick Baines, who also sits in the House of Lords, referred to Mahatma Gandhi and Nelson Mandela, who were honored with statues erected in the square in front of the British Parliament. Their protest, Baines said, would not have taken place under the circumstances of this bill. But the planned police law is by no means the only instrument that critics say the Johnson administration is trying to undermine the very foundations of separation of powers and democracy. Among other things, the control of norms in the country is to be severely restricted according to the will of the Tories. Justice Minister Dominic Raab wants to break the power of the judiciary to check government decisions for their legality with a judicial reform. His Judicial Review and Courts Bill reportedly allows the government to simply ignore unwelcome court decisions. Judicial scrutiny has been a thorn in the side of the Johnson administration since the Supreme Court declared Johnson's parliamentary recess illegal in 2019. Another one of Raab's projects envisages taking Great Britain out of the European Convention on Human Rights and thus escaping the jurisdiction of the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg. With a Nationality and Borders Bill, Home Secretary Priti Patel wants to make it almost impossible for asylum seekers who have entered the country illegally to obtain a right to stay in Great Britain. A bill to reform the electoral law, which the government pushed through the lower house on Monday, thanks to its large majority, also caused a lot of criticism. The Elections Bill provides for an obligation to present proof of identity for participation in the general election in order to prevent voter fraud. However, the opposition senses an attempt to influence voter turnout in favor of the Tories. In Great Britain, there is no identification requirement and no identity card. As a result, less affluent voters who cannot afford to travel abroad are less likely to have a passport. Demonstrators gathered in front of Parliament on Monday evening, demonstrating loudly against the restrictions on the right to assembly under the motto, "Kill the Bill." According to a report by The Guardian, a man named Nick Newman has even asked to be renamed the Kill the Police Crime Sentencing and Courts Bill in protest against the bill, although I don't find that accurate. The liberal naming law in Great Britain almost allows any choice of name. Unlike other Western democracies, Britain does not have a written constitution. In principle, the foundations of democracy and the rule of law could be undermined with a simple majority. That this does not happen is left to the principle of hope. This is also called the good chap principle. This is based on the assumption that the majority of decision makers will always support the principles of the rule of law and democracy. But are Boris Johnson and his Conservatives still good chaps? There are now a lot of doubts about that. And just one small add-on, if those bills go through, that might be another reason for that one. I really have to disappoint the Rejoin EU groups there. They will not be able to enter the EU ever again with those laws in action. Sorry. I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.